Welcome back. Bauke, there are some questions.
Yeah, we have a few questions. And the first is concerning that everything is alive. How about a car or a computer? Is that a thing or a being? Because sometimes it looks like they have a will on their own. Yeah.
Especially a computer. Well, now, a car or a computer or a table or a chair or a door is built up of atoms and molecules, and atoms and molecules are living beings. So the table itself is not a living being, but it is built of living building blocks. And in a certain way you can say that a table reflects the idea of the one who created that idea, who created that form of a table, of that type of a computer. So I think a computer or a television or a car has no will, but it is constructed by trillions of living beings, which we call atoms and molecules, etc. I think that it's the right answer.
Okay, thank you. And the next one, the question came in. What about minerals and plants in terms of the law of karma? And you, a minute later, you mentioned in your in the first part that it also applies to minerals and plants and everything that is alive. But maybe you can say something about it.
It's a little bit difficult to imagine, for me at least. Animals I can understand a little bit more because animals are closer to the human kingdom. Plants I can understand also that they learn some lessons, they learn to face to the sun, or they learn to you are a biologist about surely you know better, but they learn to produce better fruits, and maybe in the next embodiment, you may not say incarnation because they're not the body or flesh, but in the next embodiment they are a little bit better to produce the fruits, or better to cope with the sun or the soil, etc., etc. And minerals, it's even more difficult for me to imagine. And there is some very difficult teachings concerning minerals, which has to do everything with evolution and with the processes of activity and passivity, because minerals are already in a state of passivity, or they are going to a state of passivity. Yeah, we humans, we have this active phase, but there is also a great evolution round in which the whole wave of life will rest during a long time, and the minerals are already going to that big phase of inactivity, and that's why they don't move. For instance, there were times many years ago, many centuries ago, that they were more active. But even minerals can have experiences very difficult for me to imagine, and learn to better give shape to the inherent powers of the mineral kingdom, and so they will also grow in consciousness.
Yeah, and I think about chemical elements. They have also all their own characteristic based on the evolution, and they react to each other. Some don't, some do have strong reactions. So there you see also the cause and effect relation.
Yeah. So there are maybe because we have a scope of 70, 80, 90 years, but if you will look at it in periods of say 100 centuries, you will probably more easily notice that even minerals changed, evolved a little bit.
Yeah, that's important, the time scale, because as a biologist I know beautiful videos of plants that is been captured and then played 10 times the speed, and then you really recognize that them as being individuals who move and make choices. There's a really nice video of a climbing plant, and you can see that he's choosing which pole he's choose to climb in, and yeah.
And they react on each other.
Exactly.
So there's
Exactly.
also, because you only can learn in relationship to other living beings. So yeah, that's very beautiful to see. Yeah.
That's it for now. There's one more question, but we will keep it for the second or
Okay.
third part.
So we go on with the other jewels. And although they are certainly not widely known, yet the first two jewels, reincarnation and karma, are not totally unknown in the Western world. And since the founding of the Theosophical Society, these two universal truths have been spread to millions of people. Not everyone will have subjected these truths to critical examination, but some familiarity must be assumed. And it applies to a much lesser extent for the other 5 jewels of wisdom, of which we will cover jewel 3, 4 and 5 in this part of the lecture. And that is, we will try to give some pointers, express some thoughts about these ideas so you can proceed with your own research. Let's start with the third jewel, the law of hierarchies. Try not to pay attention to the word itself for a moment, because I know the word hierarchy has a bad ring to it in our world. It's often associated with blindly following orders, obeying the leader without thinking. Our idea, however, is quite different. First of all, this is already evident from the fact that in Sanskrit, these jewels are found in Sanskrit scriptures, this jewel is spoken of as lokas and talas. Time is lacking to work this out completely, but in short it comes down to this. Our world, or rather our cosmos, our universe, and you can make that cosmos as big as you want, consists of 7 worlds or spheres arising from each other. Those worlds differ in ethereal degree. They are getting coarser, so to speak. In antiquity, by the Greek and the Stoics, for example, you will find these teachings. They spoke of elements, which they gave the names earth, water, air, fire, and ether. These are only 5, you may say, and that's right. And the reason therefore is that they consider the 2 highest so exalted that they usually didn't mention them. Yet you find in the more esoteric writings that above these 5 elements or 5 worlds were still located that what was called the super ether, that is the 6th, and the 7th, the unmentionable, also called the One. And that word One is used, among others, by the philosopher Plotinus, who belonged to the school that we call now Neoplatonist. He describes how in a process of emanation the cosmic hierarchy comes into being. Emanation means to flow, and you see immediately how important this idea is, how essential the doctrine of hierarchies is, because it means that the world is not created out of nothing, but in a conscious process of emanation, the different ranks, the different steps of the ladder of life, the different worlds of the cosmic hierarchy came into being. Thus the One is the top of the hierarchy. 2 weeks ago, when we discussed the third fundamental proposition, we came across the term oversoul. And sometimes in ancient Greek writings you will find the word logos, meaning the word or the verb. You come across that word in the Bible as well. In the beginning was the word, in the beginning was the logos, and through the word all things were made. Without it, nothing was made that has been made. So it says in the Gospel of John. So from the oversoul, or the one, or the logos, or as the Upanishads from India say, from Brahma originates the entire hierarchy. Any world, every being, is a reflection in its own field of the totality, of the one. The small reflects the big, as above, so below. And you see, this is somewhat different, a different meaning of a hierarchy than is usually given to it. There are many rooms in my Father's house, we read also in the Bible. There are countless worlds. And the world we live on is the earth. And then you think of this globe, this blue planet, but actually we mean the earth atmosphere, the earth element, the earth as the Greeks saw it in the series earth, water, air, fire and ether. We identify so completely with the earth element that we don't know these other worlds. We simply don't perceive them. Although we also, paradoxically, live on those more elevated worlds, albeit unconsciously or semi-consciously, or usually not consciously. We don't notice it when we are there. And that sounds strange, it sounds maybe very strange, but do you know where you are when you sleep? Where are you when you dream? Where are you when you have a dreamless sleep? And you might say, I'm in my bed, but then ask yourself whether your consciousness is in that bed, or is it your body? Are you your body? Or uses your consciousness your body as a vehicle? And if that is the case, your body is in your bed when you sleep. Well, you are somewhere else. And where are you when you have an intuition? Aren't you then in an other world than when doing an intellectual task, or when you are angry with your boss, or when you are hungry? Well, think about it. And maybe you find out that not only the cosmos, but man himself is a hierarchy as well. The microcosmos, reflecting the macrocosmos. Speaking of man, speaking about human consciousness, then we talk about 7 principles of consciousness as well. And loyal visitors to our lectures, or other students in Theosophy, they know of course that we are talking about Atman, the spiritual principle. And now Atman is the divine principle, Buddhi, the spiritual principle, Manas, our mind, our thinking principle, Kama, desire, Prana, the vital principle, the Linka Sharira, is the model body, the astral principle, you may call it also, and the Linka Sharira is the model of the Stula Sharira, the physical principle. Well, these principles of consciousness correspond to the lokas and the talas of the Hindus, or the 7 elements of the Greek and the Stoics. And if you look at the hierarchy in that way, then it is first and foremost a unity. In that unity are 7 layers that flow from and into each other. Each of those layers in turn is again a reflection of the whole. And so again, you can discover 7 elements in it. So you can divide the earth again into 7 sub-worlds, sub-areas, but also the human manas, our mind, our thinking, can be divided in 7 thinking aspects. We explain that too in our course, Universal Wisdom. In that course we dwell at length on those 7 thinking aspects, these 7 eyes within us, 7 aspects of manas to whom we can say I. For instance, the atmic aspect of our mind, the atmic aspect of manas, we call the perception of unity, and the Buddhic aspect we call intuition, insight, and so on. So 7 universal aspects within our mind, within manas. And you see, the search for the 7 universal truths begins with yourself and within yourself. You must recognize all these ideas within yourself. Observe yourself well. Observe your thinking, and you'll find out that there are indeed 7 aspects within you, and that 3 of those aspects belong to the what we may call the nobler worlds, the spiritual or the divine worlds, and they are sustainable. And you understand then that there are human beings who are already living in those higher aspects, fully living in those higher aspects, and that they are therefore our teachers, our masters, the signposts that point in the direction to which we should develop. You will then also discover the 4th jewel, naturally. This universal truth is called self-becoming, and that means that in that cosmic hierarchy, who is divided into 7 worlds, each one in turn is divided into 7 sub-worlds, which in turn are divided into 7 sub-worlds, and so on. And they are all reflections of each other and corresponding to our own consciousness. So, in that cosmic hierarchy, we occupy exactly that place, that unique place in that hierarchical unit that we have prepared for ourselves. We end up right there, what we have made ourselves. The 4th jewel of wisdom means that every being can become nothing but itself. Every being gets exactly those abilities and qualities, and not other abilities or qualities, which it has developed itself. And we always add nothing more and nothing less. By the way, you see that you can never understand this jewel, of the jewels in general, in isolation. Without the truth of reincarnation and karma, this 4th jewel is beyond comprehension. After all, it is based on cause and effect, that you become exactly what you made yourself, and that you are born right there on the right spot in the cosmic hierarchy where you can become yourself. And if you are dissatisfied with yourself, then you have only yourself to blame, because you made yourself. You have become yourself because of your own thoughts and actions, because of your character, and your character is the sum total of all your thoughts and all your actions. It also means that each being has its purely typical own individual characteristic, its most essential self. So every being is always, by definition, different from any other. No 2 beings are the same, because if they were the same, then there were no 2 beings, but 1. Now, the jewel of self-becoming does not mean that you always remain the same, that you are doomed to always remain who you are. study the dual of self-becoming together with that of the hierarchical structure of the universe, and therefore to the fact that every human being is itself a hierarchy, and you understand that when you develop more aspects in yourself, you also rise on the hierarchy of life. You actually become more and more yourself. And we don't mean the personal self, but the higher self, that which we are in the depths of our hearts. 2 weeks ago we talked about monads, centers of consciousness, sparks of eternity, as they are called in the third fundamental proposition of the secret doctrine. That proposition speaks of the oversoul and about the sparks of that oversoul, children of that summit of the hierarchy, and the obligatory pilgrimage of every soul, that is, every monad. Where does that pilgrimage lead to? To the top of the hierarchy. And that means becoming one with the top, with the deity of the whole hierarchy. And that brings us to the fifth core idea, which should be investigated. And we call it evolution. And in itself, that word certainly is correct, because it comes from the Latin ex volvere, meaning to unwrap, to develop, unpacking what is already in you. But I tell you honestly that we have a little distaste for this word evolution, and that is because Darwinism, the materialistic biology, has hijacked that word. They use the word in the sense of transformism, as if changes in form would change consciousness, because life or consciousness, so they think, would have been created by certain chemical reactions in the substance. Examine everything and preserve the good, was Paul's advice. Is this Darwinian idea logical, or is the Theosophical idea of boundless life, of monads, centers of essential boundless consciousness going from stage to stage, that in an eternal pilgrimage activate more and more of the latent faculties that are, as it were, in the suitcase of consciousness and which are unpacked on that pilgrimage? Is not that idea much more logical? And does it not better explain all phenomena, all the facts in nature? We make no secret of it, of course, that for us the spiritual idea, the idea of consciousness or life as the basis for all phenomena, is much more consistent with the facts. Life in a body, manifested life, serves to develop those faculties of consciousness. The pilgrimage is unpacking those abilities. In short, the fifth universal truth is inner growth, awakening aspects of consciousness, which are still sleeping or slumbering. We have them all, but we haven't activated them yet. Let's go through the process of learning quickly. Do you learn because someone on the outside hands you something, puts something into you, as it were? Or do you learn because something you already know, something you already can do, but which is not yet expressed? Do you learn because something is brought out from within? If you read the dialogues of Plato, you will find some wonderful examples of this. Only by asking questions, Socrates can awaken in his listeners, his students, some truths. For example, by merely asking questions to an unskilled worker, a slave of those days, a slave, he can explain certain mathematical principles. That is, the slave discovers those mathematical principles himself. They are not communicated to him, he just answers the questions. How could he answer those questions and thus discover mathematical principles if that knowledge were not already within him? It is by asking the right questions that he remembered the answers. And that's why Plato calls learning remembering. And a teacher is a midwife. For us, a midwife does not make the child in the mother's womb, but only assists in its birth. In the same way, a teacher helps in the birth of the inner man. That inner man is already there. It is let out with the help of the teacher, and that is what we call evolution, the fifth jewel. So by thinking and acting, creating causes, being born and reborn again and again, the first and the second jewel, we constantly prepare ourselves a place in the hierarchy, the third jewel. We become ourselves again and again, the fourth jewel, constantly experiencing new things in that place of the hierarchy, learning our lessons, growing in consciousness. The fifth jewel, we will grow from baby human, so to speak, into a divine human being, one with the deity of the whole hierarchy. That is the process of progressive evolution, increasing, developing inherent, latent qualities. And what is true for a human being is true for an animal, a plant, a god, albeit those entities being in another phase of the great school of life, in another realm of nature, evolve in their ways. Nevertheless, the process is the same. They too awaken dormant faculties within themselves, so that, for example, an animal can reach the pinnacle of animal consciousness and may have learned all the lessons of the class of the animal kingdom, after which it moves on to the next class, the human kingdom. Of course, these are lengthy processes of billions of years in which there is also a certain harmonic development between the different kingdoms of nature. So that development runs parallel to major cyclical movements. We tell you the doctrine in broad terms because about this we would be able to give many lectures thanks to the knowledge given to us by our teachers. And in all those lectures we would have said very little. But in general you can say, exceptions aside, that during the life of the planet, of planet Earth, our planet, talking about human beings here on this earth or beings on this earth, each monad from one of the kingdoms of nature has the ability or the possibility, and you see, it is not an automatic process. Now, a monad has the ability to move up to the next class in the school of life. That is, for instance, the most highly developed animal monads can begin to manifest in a new embodiment of the planet in the human kingdom. And human monads may become, in a subsequent embodiment of the planet, gods. No visas of gods, of course, because in that class of the school of life we have to start from the beginning. We are on the bottom again, but now in another kingdom of nature. You see, the process of evolution contains a great deal, but this lecture only tries to give a general outline, provide some key thoughts as a tool for further research. Over the course of the season, many of these aspects of Theosophia return, and then with much more detail. Anyway, Evolution is bringing out inner latent abilities, and the more inner abilities we bring out, the more we become our self, the fourth jewel, and as a result we rise on the ladder of life until we finally reach the top and become one with that summit, the core of the universe. But that's the seventh jewel. We will discuss that jewel after the break, and we will try also to give an answer to the question, why do we actually want to grow? Why do we want to reach that summit and become one with the self of the universe? But first, again, a break of 3 minutes, ask your questions, and we see each other in 3 minutes. Welcome back. Bauke.
Yeah, we have one question, and that is concerning hierarchies. Is the last hierarchy the unknowable one? And in between brackets, Tat. And I have to say, in the meanwhile, I replied, which last hierarchy in infinity? And then she elaborated a little bit, and she said, well, the point at where everything, our universe, let's say, emerged. Does it continue afterwards?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question, and I understand the question because we as human beings tend to think in limits because there is something beyond it. But at a certain moment we want to have a kind of rest point. But there is boundlessness. The first proposition is the most important in that sense. There is boundlessness. There is no end. There is no absolute end. Of course there are beginnings and there are ends. Yeah, we are being born, that you may call a beginning of this manifested life, and there is an end, that is what we call death. But it's just a relative beginning and a relative end. So our hierarchy, and let's say that our hierarchy is the solar system, yeah, with 7 layers, 7 worlds. In fact, there are 10 worlds, but not to make it very difficult, you see, it's all relative because 7 manifested worlds and 3 unmanifested worlds, as we learn from our teachers. Gottfried de Bruyker, for instance, he says that in his works, in his books. So there are 7 manifested worlds, but 3 worlds which are unmanifested, and we call them saying form, formless world, arupa in Sanskrit. But they exist. Yeah. And you may say that the highest of all those worlds is the lowest of the hierarchy, which is superior to our hierarchy. Yeah? But for us, it is the horizon. We cannot see beyond the horizon. It's what in Theosophy is called the ring pass not. We can simply not perceive anything from that other hierarchy, but it is there, it exists. And if you go downstairs, and downstairs not literally, but less evolved, you have a hierarchy as well. So there are hierarchies within hierarchies. There is never an end. So what for us is the one, yeah, is maybe the 3 of the hierarchy above it, or of the 5 or the 6, yeah. So relativity, everything is relative. The only thing that is not relative, you should remember that, is the first principle, the first fundamental idea, the boundless principle. And all other doctrines, all other things are related to each other. So not absolute in the sense that there is an absolute beginning or end. And I think a human consciousness, human mind is trying to find endpoints, and that's why we created gods. We created a God who is the end of everything. No, that doesn't exist. And that limits you in your thinking. So open your mind and try to see that there is no end, that it's ongoing. You want to add something?
Yeah, because what I like so much about children, it's such a logical idea, because I know personally a few children that ask, but who made God then? Or what was before God?
Yeah.
So it's the
Or the
fundamental philosophical idea that the child understands.
exactly, because it's the same with the Big Bang.
Yeah.
The Big Bang is the beginning of everything. But what was before the Big Bang? Yeah. So even in our intellect, we have to conclude that there cannot be an absolute begin or an absolute end. But nevertheless, that question is very good, because we all struggle with this, and it's good to help each other to break our molds of thinking and open and the horizon and go beyond and see broader perspectives, etc., etc.
We have two more questions via the mail from somebody. Is the way to develop our consciousness in concentrating ourselves on the self-becoming with focus on the higher levels?
Yes, yeah. So to put it very, very, very simple, you have to change the personal into the above personal, the super personal. So the I am I consciousness, I will tell something about it in the third part, should become the I am consciousness. And how do you do that? Well, live the doctrine, live the ethics, be unselfish, be compassionate, try to identify with, humanity, with the big whole, and it's not something you can do overnight. No, it takes time, but if you have the right direction and you know how to do it, it's a very happy pilgrimage. It brings a lot of fun and a lot of satisfaction and the best, the happiest thing is that you are able to help your other human beings, and that's the summit of happiness. So if you do that, I will assure you, your life will be much more useful and satisfactory, and there is no room anymore for deception, or you know what to do.
And her second question, I think you gave the answer already on that as well. Is there a relationship between the way of self-becoming and experience of the inner self in direction to eternity in ourself?
Yeah. Oh, yes. That too is a process that is, like the dawn. It's not from one moment fully light. No, it's dark, and then it's a little bit. The sun is rising. It takes some time, and wisdom also dawns in you, and not from one day to the other. And well, that's a process. Am I going to say something about it when discussing the seventh jewel? Well, I think that's the answer, yeah?
And one more question now in the chat. The human being is the fourth hierarchy, question mark, but maybe we have to ask the questioner to elaborate on it. I am not sure what she means. The human being is the fourth hierarchy.
If you have the hierarchy, you have 10 kingdoms, the 3 kingdoms of the gods, and then you have the human kingdom, that is the fourth, and then you have the animal, plants, minerals, and 3 elemental kingdoms. So I think yes, and we are the fourth. So we are more evolved. You can say better or nobler. That's not because entity is a monad. So in essence, we are equal. So you can't say that a god is better than a human or a human is better than an animal, because we are all monads. But a god, of course, is more evolved, and therefore is wiser and is nobler, because he perceived more than humans the unity of life. And we humans are in a phase where self-consciousness is activated, because our manas, our thinking capacity, is awakened, thanks to the gods, but that's another story. So we have a certain role to play on the whole hierarchy, like every kingdom has a certain role to play. And the trouble in the world you see today, and maybe we're going to tell something about it in the last session by the questions, the trouble we see today is that we as human beings, in general, don't play our role correctly. And, well...
Okay, yeah, that was it for for now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, with the 5 universal truths,